Seniors, pay close attention because what just happened in Washington could directly affect your money, your safety, your retirement accounts, and your future. A major new federal law called Senate Bill 2184, officially known as the Senior Fraud Protection Act, has now become law. And despite how important this legislation is, millions of older Americans still have absolutely no idea what it actually does. The headlines came and went, the media moved on, but the details, the parts that truly matter, were barely explained. That is a serious problem because this law contains protections, recovery programs, fraud prevention systems, and financial safeguards specifically designed for Americans over 60. Some protections activate automatically, many do not. Some require registration, some require updated records, and some contain deadlines that, if missed, could delay protections or recovery options for years. So today, we are breaking down exactly what changed in plain English. No legal jargon, no political spin, just the real-world impact this law could have on retirees, Social Security recipients, Medicare beneficiaries, and families caring for aging parents. Before we go deeper, you need to understand why Congress acted now. For decades, older Americans have quietly become the primary targets of organized financial crime. Not small scams, not isolated fraud cases. An entire industry of professional fraud networks has been built around targeting seniors. Every year, older Americans lose an estimated $36 billion to financial fraud and exploitation. That money disappears from retirement savings, pensions, Social Security deposits, investment accounts, and life savings, built over 40 or 50 years of work. And until now, the federal response has been fragmented, slow, underfunded, and reactive. Senate Bill 2184 changes that. This is the largest, most heavily funded, and most operationally aggressive anti-fraud law ever created, specifically for senior citizens in the United States. And the reason you need to understand the details is simple. The real protection is hidden inside the specifics, not the headlines, not the press conferences, the specifics. The first major section of the law creates something called the Senior Fraud Prevention and Response Fund. This is not a temporary pilot program. It is a permanent protected federal funding stream worth $400 million every single year, dedicated exclusively to protecting seniors from fraud, exploitation, identity theft, and financial abuse. That money cannot simply be redirected elsewhere when political priorities change. It is legally locked into fraud prevention and victim protection. So what does that money actually do? First, it funds the hiring of more than 500 new specialized investigators across the FBI, Federal Trade Commission, and Department of Justice. And these investigators are not general white-collar crime agents. Their only assignment is elder financial fraud. That means investigators trained specifically to recognize romance scams, Medicare fraud, identity theft, banking exploitation, fake investment schemes, Social Security fraud, caregiver theft, property scams, targeting retirees. The law also creates 37 senior fraud rapid response units distributed across every federal circuit in the country. Why does that matter? Because under the old system, seniors often filed complaints that sat untouched for months before anyone reviewed them. Under the new system, specially trained response teams can now begin reviewing major fraud cases within 72 hours. But one of the most important changes in the entire bill is the creation of the Federal Victim Recovery Fund. This changes everything for fraud victims. In the past, if a senior lost money to a scam, they usually had to wait years for criminal prosecutions to finish before any chance of restitution existed. And in many cases, victims never recovered anything because the criminals had already hidden or spent the stolen money. Under Senate Bill 2184, verified fraud victims over age 65 may now qualify for interim financial recovery directly from the federal fund while the criminal case is still ongoing. That means seniors no longer have to wait years hoping money might someday return. The recovery process can begin much earlier. For many retirees living on fixed income, that difference could be life-changing. The next major section of the law focuses on identity theft and financial account protection. And this may be one of the most important updates for retirees in decades. Right now, Social Security numbers are the key to almost every part of a person's financial identity. Bank accounts, tax filings, Medicare records, credit applications, retirement benefits. And when criminals gain access to a senior's Social Security number, the damage can continue for months before the victim even realizes anything happened. That delay is exactly what fraud organizations rely on. Senate Bill 2184 creates the first real-time senior identity alert system tied directly to Social Security monitoring. Here's how it works. The Social Security Administration will now cross-check Social Security numbers belonging to Americans age 62 and older against suspicious fraud activity databases every single day. If suspicious activity appears, alerts can be sent directly to the senior or to a trusted emergency contact within 24 hours, not months later. Not after collections begin, not after accounts are drained, within 24 hours. But there is one extremely important catch. This system works through My Social Security accounts at ssa.gov. If a senior does not have an account set up, the alert system has nowhere to send warnings. That is why this law also funds free in-person setup assistance at Social Security offices and participating public libraries nationwide. Now let's talk about banks. For years, banks and credit unions operated under inconsistent voluntary fraud guidelines when suspicious senior transactions appeared. Some institutions intervened aggressively, others barely acted at all. That changes under this law. Every financial institution holding accounts for customers age 62 and older must now establish mandatory senior protection procedures. That includes a designated senior account protection officer, mandatory transaction, monitoring specific reporting requirements, fraud response timelines, trusted contact registration systems. And for the first time, banks that ignore obvious fraud warning signs may now face financial liability if seniors suffer losses because mandatory protocols were ignored. That changes the incentive structure completely. Banks are no longer encouraged to act. They are legally required to act. One of the most emotionally devastating forms of fraud targeting seniors involves romance scams and emotional manipulation schemes. Until now, most of these cases were prosecuted under general fraud laws. But Senate Bill 2184 creates an entirely new federal criminal category called elder emotional manipulation fraud. This specifically targets criminals who intentionally build fake emotional or romantic relationships with seniors in order to steal money. And the penalties are significantly stronger. Enhanced punishment now applies when the victim is over 65. The victim was isolated or living alone. Grief or loneliness was intentionally exploited. Losses exceeded $25,000. Psychological harm was documented. Federal sentencing enhancements under this law can increase penalties by as much as 50%. The message is clear. Targeting lonely seniors is no longer being treated as ordinary financial fraud. The next major area involves Medicare fraud, and this affects far more seniors than most people realize. Fraudulent Medicare billing schemes have exploded in recent years. Criminals use stolen Medicare numbers to bill for services, equipment, or treatments that patients never actually received. And sometimes the victim does not discover the fraud until legitimate medical services are later denied because benefit limits were already exhausted fraudulently. Senate Bill 2184 allocates an additional $120 million specifically for Medicare fraud detection systems. That includes new artificial intelligence monitoring systems capable of detecting suspicious billing activity far faster than the older manual review systems. The law also creates a Medicare fraud victim recovery program. This allows seniors who lost benefit access because of fraudulent billing to apply for restoration of Medicare coverage and additional future service credits. Now let's talk about housing fraud. This has become one of the fastest growing threats facing older Americans. Reverse mortgage scams, fraudulent deed transfers, predatory home repair contracts, manipulative senior living agreements. The law now creates three major protections: a mandatory 3-day cooling-off period for housing-related transactions involving seniors, independent legal review requirements for certain mortgage and deed transactions, federal certification standards for companies marketing housing services to seniors. These changes are designed to slow down high-pressure financial manipulation before irreversible damage occurs. The final section of Senate Bill 2184 may be the most important because it requires direct action from seniors themselves. The law creates a national senior fraud registry managed by the Federal Trade Commission. This is a voluntary protection system seniors can join for free. Once registered, participating financial institutions and organizations must apply additional verification procedures before processing certain high-risk transactions connected to that individual. It is not a perfect shield against fraud, but it creates another critical layer of protection against automated scams and identity theft operations. Registration takes about 15 minutes through ftc.gov. Seniors will need their Social Security number, date of birth contact information, a trusted emergency contact. Once enrolled, seniors receive a registry confirmation number that can be shared with banks, Medicare plans, and other participating institutions. Now here is what every senior should do immediately. First, create or verify your My Social Security account at ssa.gov. Second, contact your bank and ask 3 questions. Who is the Senior Account Protection Officer? What transaction alerts exist for my account? How do I register a trusted contact? Third, review every Medicare explanation of benefit statement from the past year for unfamiliar charges. And finally, register with the National Senior Fraud Registry through the official FTC website. But before we close, there is one final warning every senior needs to hear. Scammers are already exploiting this law. Criminals are already pretending to represent Medicare, the FTC, Social Security, and federal agencies offering help registering seniors for new protections. Those calls are scams. The federal government will not cold call seniors asking for personal information to activate protections under Senate Bill 2184. Never give personal information to unsolicited callers. Always contact official agencies directly using verified phone numbers or official government websites. Senate Bill 2184 will not eliminate fraud completely. No law can. But for the first time in years, the federal government has created a serious, fully funded, large-scale system specifically designed to protect older Americans from financial predators. And in today's world, information may be the single most important protection seniors still have. Share this with every senior you love.